Hey guys, Josh here. After being in early access since 2018, Kynseed, the sandbox life sim RPG from Pixel Count Studios, finally got its full release on Steam today, December 6, 2022. I've been playing the full version of the game for the last week. I put about 30 hours in, and in this video I would like to share with you how my experience with the game has been so far. We'll go over all of the major gameplay mechanics, how this game differs from others in the genre, and hopefully by the end of the video you should have a good idea of whether or not this game is for you. I want to start by talking about the prologue and setting of the game. You'll first pick between two siblings, there's one boy and one girl, and you'll choose their hair and skin color. There's no character customization in this game beyond that, but one of the key features of Kynseed is that you get to play as your child when you pass away, so your character will change a few times during your playthrough. For your first character, you will also get to make a few choices that will determine your starting stats, like if you prefer running a business or starting a family, and you can use these to help you choose what you'll be focusing on during your life. The first season of the game is the prologue, and like every season in Kynseed, it lasts for 14 days. During that time, you'll be living with your uncle, your sibling, and you'll learn the basics of the game. You'll get to feed the pig, milk the cow, do some farming, some fishing, go to the different stores and meet the villagers. This game has a lot of different mechanics and things to do. It could feel a bit overwhelming at first, but it also offers a ton of tools to guide you. The pause menu contains a tutorial with tons of hints and tips. There's a button you can press and then go over the different pieces of furniture in your house, for example, and it will tell you how to use them. If you're lost during a task, you can also activate a thing called the Tatterway, which is a little glowing arrow that will show you where to go. Kynseed does an amazing job with its tutorials and introducing the game to the player, and you might feel like it's restrictive or holding your hand quite a bit at first in the very beginning, but it becomes extremely open-ended once the prologue is over. Something else I really liked about how the game teaches you new things is that as you play you will find proverbs which will give you hints on where or how to collect certain items, and you'll find books who will not only tell you about the lore of the game if you're interested, but some of them will also explain more complex game mechanics, like how to run a store or how to get married. These make the game very immersive and allow you to figure things out without having to rely on a wiki or other sources outside of the game. Speaking of books, the writing in this game is amazing. The way certain characters speak will make you feel like you're inside a fairy tale. Item descriptions are always funny. The proverbs I mentioned earlier are all written in a poetic way, all while still being useful. There are puns everywhere, especially in character names like Lemmy Sip, Hazelnut, Page Turner. Most characters will have funny names like that to match their job or interests. And the main story is intriguing. I won't talk about it too much as part of the fun is discovering it on your own, but it is more interesting than your typical just taking over the family farm. And it also gives you the motivation to keep progressing in order to get different rewards and see what happens. Overall though, I would say the plot of the game is more like a thing in the background, and the main story is really the one you will decide to create. One thing I should mention is that the studio behind this game, Pixel Count Studios, was founded by ex-members of Lionhead Studios who worked on the Fable series. If you've played any of the Fable games, you will definitely recognize some of it in there. There are even a few Easter eggs, or Easter chickens, but it's the kind of game that really lets you forge your own path, so let's see what are some of the things you can do. Of course, there is farming. This one is pretty simple. First, you'll have to buy seeds, which you can sometimes find at the general store or at the market on specific days, which are the 3rd and the 10th of each month, so make sure you don't miss out. Then you'll go back to your farm where you will find fields in preset location. So you have to select each square individually, which will open a menu, and then you'll get to pick the seed you want to plant in that location. I wish there was a way to plant seeds without having to open the menu every time, but at least you don't have to till the soil, so that kind of makes up for the time lost, I guess. Watering your crops is very easy. You just take out your watering can, and if you play with the mouse and keyboard, simply hold the right click and go over all of your crops until the little blue bar is filled. The green bar under it shows how many days left before your crop is ready to harvest, which is useful to see. I'll talk about the controls very quickly. They are great. I've been playing with mouse and keyboard. It feels pretty intuitive. And if you prefer to play with a controller, the game is also well adapted for that. The HUD will even change depending on if you play with a keyboard or with a controller, and you can remap all of the keys. So honestly, in terms of controls, it is very good. There are also a few accessibility settings. For example, you can disable screen shake or flashing effects. as well as slowing down the combat speed if you'd like. So it's good to see the developers really put a lot of effort into accessibility and controls. The only little nitpick I will say is that there are lots of different menus. There is the inventory menu, which shows all of your items, collectibles, proverbs. Then there's the relationships menu, which shows all of the characters with their likes, dislikes, age, stats, and personality traits. There's another menu for the quests and calendar, another one for the player stats and skill trees, and another one for the map. I understand the game has a lot of content and lots of things to display, but I feel like some of these menus could have been combined. For example, the skill trees, player stats, and relationships could have been maybe extra tabs in the same menu as the quest and the calendar, bringing down the number of menus from 5 to 3. This is not a deal breaker, but even like 30 hours in, I sometimes find myself opening the wrong menu when I'm looking for something specific. But other than that though, the controls are great and most of it is very intuitive. The game also performs well. I didn't have any slowdowns. It also looks great. As you can see, it's definitely a different style than your typical farming sim. It's a bit darker or more realistic. A lot of the characters are ugly. Even the main character looks a bit like a mess. It might not please everybody, but you can't argue that they really put a lot of care into the style and the pixel art. It's just filled with details. Also, the weather effects are beautiful. Like when the wind is strong, you can see the wind carrying the leaves. Other times, there's gonna be heavy rain or fog, and all of the weather effects are so beautiful. Every season is different and beautiful in their own way with their own little changes. And on top of that, the music is relaxing and it changes from one region to the other to match the atmosphere. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna put any music in this video because I streamed the game earlier today and I got copyright claimed because of the music. But if you wanna hear the music, I'll put the link to the live stream and you can check it out. But it's just very relaxing and very beautiful music. But going back to the farming, each item in this game has a star quality rating ranging from 1 to 5, and they all have different ways of increasing their quality. As I said earlier, as you play you will find proverbs by finding pages scattered around the world or by befriending people, but sometimes you will also find star rating tips. These are tips telling you how to increase the rating of a specific item. For example, carrots will gain a star if they are harvested during the first week of winter, and cabbage will prefer to be harvested in windy weather. If you want to cook high quality dishes or make a good profit out of your crops, you will have to learn these things and plan your harvest accordingly, which adds an interesting layer of complexity to the game. I like that it makes each crop and each item in the game actually different from each other, and it rewards players who take the time to do things the right way. Also, it takes a while to learn all of these tips, and it might seem like a lot, but you will learn them very gradually as you play, so it doesn't feel overwhelming. The food you collect can then be used for cooking, and recipes are learned the same way proverbs and rating tips are, so sometimes you'll find them or learn them from the villagers. There are 7 categories of recipes like jams, stews, pie, bread, and more, and each one will be done through a different minigame. These minigames are actually pretty creative and it can be a bit challenging, especially for your first few dishes when you're still trying to figure things out. For example, if you make jam, your main goal is to maintain the temperature of the pot just right, not too high and not too low. Over time, the pot gets hotter, but each time you add a new ingredient, it gets a bit cooler. So you have to time everything right and adjust the fire accordingly. And if you do, you will get a higher star rating, which will be determined by not only how well you did, but also the quality of your ingredients. Another category of recipes is the stews, where each ingredient requires a specific cooking time. So you need to chop and put into the pot the ingredients that take the longest to cook first, and end with the ones that cook the fastest. Overall, I really enjoyed those minigames. I like how they're all different and challenging, but one thing that annoyed me was cutting herbs. For example, one of the first stews you'll make requires basil as the last ingredient because it cooks very quickly. It's really important to put it at the right time, but for some reason, sometimes I kept chopping and chopping the basil, and even though I didn't see any big pieces left on the board, the game just wouldn't register it as fully cut, and I would just chop frantically trying to put it into the pot in time, but it was just too late and my other ingredients would burn. Cutting everything else was fine, but I wish the game was a little bit more lenient on the herbs. So cooking could seem tedious having to go through all of this every single time. To be honest, it can be at the beginning of the game, especially if you're trying to cook a ton of dishes in a row, But overall, since all of the minigames are different, I actually quite like it. And there's also a skill tree in this game which will let you unlock skills if you bring back certain items to different masters around the world. And as an example, some skills in the cooking skill tree will grant you a double yield when cooking certain dishes, and later on in game you'll be able to get some items which will also double the yield of your cooking, so you can double 2 times and get like 4 dishes just by cooking 1. So the game definitely offers you ways to cook more than 1 dish at once. There are also skill trees for gardening, fishing, melee combat, ranged combat, and exploration. They will require a bit of work to complete, as sometimes you will need a lot of items and they will need to have a certain star rating, but the good news is that those skills will be passed down from generation to generation. And cooking is not the only thing that involves minigames. In Kynseed, brewing potions and forging are pretty similar, yet the games are different, and you'll do a lot of these things if you're planning to open your own shop. At the beginning of the game, you can make a bit of money by setting up a stall at the market, but there won't be that much traffic. And you can also go into different shops and sell them your stuff, but they have a limited budget. So if you really want to make good money, you will have to open your own shop. There are 4 different towns, each with a general goods store, 1 blacksmith, and 1 apothecary that you can purchase. You will be able to run a tavern eventually, but that is planned for a future update. The shop I spent the most time with was the blacksmith. I bought it for 500 coins, it came with some ores and tools, and I decided to hire the 2 previous staff, Jeffrey and Jeremy. It's a small detail, but unfortunately, their proficiency level was at the lowest, even though they had been running the shop on their own for a little while, so that broke the immersion a little bit for me. You can hire employees to help you, you can set their weekly schedule, they will become more and more proficient over time, and they can do a few things on their own and take care of customers, but they are pretty slow at first. So I would recommend helping them until they become a bit faster. There's also a table in your ledger where you can see your profits and all of that stuff, and I love those details. As a blacksmith, you'll have customers walking in and they will say things like, I need something to cut weeds, or I need to bury something urgently, not sketchy at all, and you'll have to sell them the right tool. You need to make sure you have a bit of everything in your inventory, because if, for example, they want a shovel and you don't have one, they will be unhappy and it will affect your reputation negatively. You'll also have customers placing order. For example, they will say, I want a copper sword and I'll come pick it up at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So these requests are a little bit more difficult because they will request a specific type of ore to use. So usually I would go mining at the end of the day if necessary, and then forge all of my orders for the upcoming days. As your reputation increases, more and more customers will come to your shop, even all the way from other towns. And you will also unlock some perks. For example, as a blacksmith, you can unlock the ability to order ores and tools. So at first I had to go mining a lot and I spent a lot of time just forging all kinds of tools, but now I can order shovels and sickles, so I only need to forge swords. Orders do take a few days to arrive, so you have to plan ahead, but once again, there is also a perk that can make those deliveries faster. I'm really enjoying running the blacksmith shop, and honestly, I could just do this all day, every day. The second shop I bought, I didn't put as much time into yet, but that is the general goods store. This one is pretty different because you can sell pretty much anything you want. You just put the items on the shelf, decide the price, and wait for the customers to walk around and pick them up. One difference with this shop is that you do set the price, whereas with the blacksmith, prices are fixed depending on the quality of the item. So you have to figure out what's the right price for each item and find the right balance between making customers happy and increasing your reputation, but also making enough profit. Sometimes you will get them in game where you barter, and if you stop the arrow in the green, you will sell the item for a bit more money. Other times, villagers will also come in and just ask you to buy some items from them. I don't know if you played a game called Reciteer, an item shop still, but running the general goods store felt very similar to that game. I haven't bought the apothecary yet, but I brewed a few potions and quite enjoyed the minigame. It seems very daunting at first, but it's just crushing the ingredients, making sure they don't get too cold or too hot, and then you need to balance out the color of the smoke by looking at the color wheel and just putting some of the opposite color. So I want my first 2 shops to be running well before I invest into a third one, but so far I really like that the experience in both shops is so different. I find the blacksmith is more active, where I have to juggle between forging different items, preparing orders, serving customers, And the general store, at least so far, has been a lot more laid back. So I mentioned reputation a few times while talking about the shops, and maybe I should explain a bit. So each shop has its own reputation, which, as I said, will bring more customers and unlock perks, but your character also has their own reputation level. The two best ways to increase your reputation are running a shop and also fighting monsters, which I will talk about in a few seconds, but you can also increase your reputation by helping villagers with tasks or by participating in festivals. As you increase your reputation level, you will progress in the main story and unlock special items that will give you passive bonuses or special abilities, so it's definitely something you want to focus on. And now, let's talk about the combat. To be honest, I'm not always a fan of having combat in my life sim games, but Kynseed handles this so well. First, combat only happens in very specific areas, so you will not encounter any monsters while trying to fish or forage. And second, while you probably will need to go fighting one day or another if you want to complete everything the game has to offer, you can also lead a completely fulfilling and successful life in Kynseed just by running your shop and doing other peaceful activities. The opposite is true as well. You could spend most of your time fighting monsters and not too much time running businesses. Or you can try to do a bit of both. I like how the game feels very open-ended and you never feel forced to do a specific thing more than another. Anyway, the combat is pretty fun. There are three main forests: simple wood, mid wood, and tough wood, each with their own difficulty level and monsters. As you enter an area, you will get to pick your equipment like potions, food, shield, and weapon, as well as an animal companion, which can be a cat, dog, pig, sheep, or any one of the many animals you can buy at shops and during auctions. And these animals will boost your stats or help you beat up the monsters. After picking your equipment, you will enter your first battle, and the combat is a mix between turn-based and action. So there are 3 rows, and you can spend one of your stamina points to use your sword and attack an enemy that's in front of you or 1 row away, but you cannot attack an enemy that's at the back or 2 rows away. So if you're at the complete top, you cannot attack an enemy at the bottom. For that, you will have to move, or you can use your bow and try to shoot at them. You can also dodge by changing rows, and you can parry. Sometimes enemies will put traps on the battlefield, so you will have to keep in mind where your character is positioned so you don't get trapped when you attack. It's a lot of just little things like that. It's nothing too complicated, but it is engaging and it can be a bit difficult later on. After each battle, you will have the option to either continue to the next battle, go deeper, which will make enemies stronger and drop more valuable items, or you can just leave with your current loot. The further you go in the forest, the more your reputation will increase. Sometimes you will also have minigame stages, like one of them you have to memorize the mushrooms and hit them in the correct order. And there's another minigame where you have to parry the blue flames to destroy the statues. These minigames will reward you with some items even if you lose, and they are a great way to just take a little break in between battles. Once you're out of battles, besides running your shop, farming, fishing, mining, and foraging, there are even more things you can do. On some days, you'll have festivals like animal racing events, or things like a flower or vegetable contest where you need to bring the highest quality items you have. Other days you will find goods markets or animal auctions, and each of the 4 towns have their own events on different days. Once again, this is something that could feel overwhelming, but the game lets you track the ones you're interested in on your calendar, and the game doesn't make you feel bad or feel like you're missing out if you skip on some events. Some days you should never skip, however, are the 7th and 14th of each month, which are the Druida days. On those days, you can make offerings to the goddesses, which will give you perks for the whole week. The higher quality item you give, the better the benefit will be, but each benefit will also come with a curse. For example, you could have a benefit increasing the quality of any berry you forage, but the curse will be that you won't be able to grow any crops. Or you could have like monsters will have a lower chance of dealing critical hits in combat, but you will have a lesser chance of having a baby, or something like that. There's always a pro and a con, and it's fun as this affects how your week will be. It spices things up and makes it so you have to change the way you play. If you don't offer anything, however, you will just get some random curses with no benefits, so make sure you don't forget to do an offering. You should also do a daily offering to the brownies or brownies, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but once you're an adult, you will have to put something every day in this bowl that is in front of your house, It can be really anything, it doesn't have to be valuable, but if you forget, bad things will start happening. As an example, on the first day, apples will rot on your apple trees, and there can be up to 5 negative effects that add up together if you forget multiple days in a row. So it is important you always give something to the brownies. So as you see, there's quite a lot to do every day in Kynseed, but one good thing is that except during the prologue when you're a child, you don't have to go to bed. You can stay up all night, all day, you will not pass out or get tired, and when you do want to go to sleep, you can decide for how many hours and when you'll wake up. I kind of wish there was at least some benefit to sleeping besides just passing the time, or maybe some negative effect if you didn't sleep for multiple days in a row. But it doesn't seem like it does anything, at least that I noticed. But if you're worried about having to go to bed early or something, just rest assured that you won't have to stress too much about that in Kynseed. One more thing you'll probably spend a good amount of time doing in Kynseed is maintaining good relationships with the different villagers. You can do so by giving them gifts, and you'll have to figure out what they like and dislike, which luckily will show up in the menu once you know it. As you give gifts to the villagers, they will sometimes give you hints about certain items or other villagers, telling you about what they like or dislike or when their birthday is. Also, if you're good friends with someone, they will give you permission to use and collect items around their house, which is very useful because many characters will have fruit trees or gardens. Friends will also send you gifts by mail, and at 3 hearts you can do a special quest for them. However, even though there's a huge variety of characters that they all have funny names, their own traits, likes and dislikes, you will pretty quickly find out that they can be pretty bland. I think this is somewhat unavoidable since characters in this game pass away and new characters are born every year. So besides the first sentence when you meet them, and also the friendship quest you can do for them or some special events like that, they will pretty much always say the same things at all times. The only differences you will notice in the dialogue is between characters who like you and characters who dislike you. I wish it was similar to maybe how it is in Animal Crossing, where there are different personality types and each type determines what things a character will say, but that's not the case, and honestly there's not too much fun in just talking with the characters. Even, for example, if you just get married on the day of your wedding, your spouse is most likely not gonna say anything special, which is a little bit disappointing. Just keep those things in mind. I don't think it makes the game bad, but just don't go in expecting deep and complex characters, as you would see maybe in a farming game that has way less characters. But it is still a fun gameplay mechanic to try to be friendly with as many people as you can, and I think the rewards do make up for it. I just wish the characters felt a tiny bit more human. And now let's talk about marriage. In this game you can marry pretty much anyone, which I guess is one of the good sides of not having complex characters. They can make everybody a marriage candidate. So I decided to marry Jeffrey Black, the guy from the blacksmith shop. I was 18 and he was 32, so that felt a bit weird at first, but everybody else was either older or very scary looking, and he was funny the first time I talked to him, until he became like everybody else. That being said, the marriage process is fun. It is a 7-day ritual, so there's a book in the game that tells you what to do, but each day you have to do a specific task, and at the end you will bake a pie and exchange it for a ring. Then you can propose and choose the date of your wedding. Unfortunately, it was raining on my wedding day, and I felt like it rained a lot in Kynseed. Fortunately, a bit later in game, you will unlock trinkets that will allow you to change the weather, but I felt like there was really a lot of rain. But despite all of these things, married life is pretty amazing. You can set the schedule for each family member and decide at what time they will go to bed, water crops, prepare food, take care of the animals, or just take some time to chill. You can also send them on an expedition, give them tools, and they will collect whatever they can get in that area with those tools. Since there's so much to do in this game, this feature allows you to be way more productive and focus on what you want to do the most. And also, I love when family members help you in life sim games. As with any good life sim game, you can have children in Kynseed. You need to give your spouse an item called the rabbit corn doll, and that will roll a wheel of delight, and if the wheel stops on the stork, you will get 1 child, and if it stops on the 2 storks, you will get twins. I had some issues at first, you may have witnessed it during my stream, but it's been fixed in the latest patch, and I can now confirm that after getting the stork on the wheel, a new task should trigger, and 7 days later you will have a baby delivered to your house. Your baby will just stay in their crib for the first year, but once they grow up, you can set their schedule just like your spouse, and you can also tell them to socialize, explore, or study, and the things they do will determine how their stats will increase. Once you're ready to pass over your legacy, if your child is under 18, years will skip until they're 18, and if you don't have a child, you will be asked to adopt a random one, but most likely they won't have very good stats. If you fulfilled your character's life goals, like collecting a certain amount of money, reputation, and friends, and smaller things like winning festivals or cutting a certain amount of grass, you will gain extra stats to allocate to your heir when they take over. They will also get all of your inventory, businesses, skills, and friendships will also be pretty much the same minus a few points. So if you do things right, each generation should end up with better stats and an easier life than the previous one, and the cycle just repeats like that. The last thing I would like to touch on is the way the years pass. Once you're an adult, every year you will be able to exchange some years for trinkets that can do special things, like teleporting to different locations or changing the weather. These years will be added to your year's tax. If you die too many times in combat, you will also get years added to your tax, and at the end of each year, this tax is paid and everybody will age for the amount of years taxed. So it's not uncommon to see time jump by 10 years at the end of a year. At the beginning of the following year, you will have a summary letting you know what happens in those years, who passed away, who got married, and if any babies were born. You will see villagers get older with gray hair or moving with others when they get married, and it's pretty fun overall to see how they're evolving. I wonder what happens over extremely long playthroughs. Let's say you go through 10 or maybe 20 generations. I don't think anyone is there yet, of course, but I'm curious to see if maybe some characters will start reappearing, or if the population declines or something like that. This whole generation mechanic and the way the years go by is just very refreshing to see in a game like this, and it almost feels closer to a game like The Sims rather than Story of Seasons or Stardew Valley. To conclude, Kynseed does a ton of very creative things, and it truly manages to feel different from the plethora of life and farm sims that we've been getting in recent years. There are lots of ways to play, the cooking, foraging, and brewing mechanics are diverse and innovative, running the shops is very fun, the combat system is engaging, the controls are intuitive, and you can spend so much time on this game going from one generation to the next, gradually improving your stats and increasing your wealth. Some negatives would be the lack of customization, the lack of personality from the villagers, and little nitpicks like what I said with the huge amount of menus, but the positives really outweigh the negatives here. So what do you think? Have you played Kynseed when it was in early access? Are you playing the full version right now? What do you think? If you were undecided, I hope this video helped you make a decision. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments, leave a like and subscribe for more Kynseed content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.